Thank you for joining us in our third of our weekly podcasts. This week we'll have David Cornelius, Native American interpreter and historian, with our own Bill Buell, talking about the origins of the name Schenectady. Also, please make sure to join us this week and next, November 26th through December 6th, for our third annual Festival of Trees. And don't forget to check out our website, www.schist.org. That's www.schist.org. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Buell, a reporter with the Daily Gazette here in Schenectady, and I'm sitting here today with David Cornelius, an American Indian of Mohawk and Mohegan descent. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Mohawk Indian Nation and the Iroquois Nation, and maybe a bunch of other Indian tribes as well. David, I'm going to start out by asking you about the name Schenectady, where it comes from, and what did the Mohawks have to do with the name?
Okay. Before we do that, Iroquois is a bad word.
Okay. Well, we explain that then.
Iroquois is, or Iroquois, was an Algonquian word for rattlesnake. Okay, the French picked it up from the Algonquians and called them the Iroquois, added the O-I-S on the end. And so the Iroquois are the rattlesnakes, the enemies of the Algonquin. So that's where that word comes from. And everybody knows it as the Iroquois Confederacy and the Iroquois. And in fact, the Iroquois, they call it the Iroquoian language group, okay, as distinct from the Algonquian language group, even though there's an Algonquian tribe up in Canada. Everybody speaks an Algonquian language. Okay, so that's the difference between Iroquois and what they really are is the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse. So I try to use Haudenosaunee, but I slip up a lot myself. But Iroquois is proper for the language group, which includes the Cherokee and the Neutrals and the Eries and the Hurons and the Susquehannocks, who weren't part of the Confederacy originally. Anyway, so much. Schenectady in Mohawk means beyond the pines. So what they were referring to, the Mohawk people, when they said Schenectady, was Albany. They would go to Albany for fishing in the summertime because the sturgeon were a main source of protein for the Indians. And even though it was Mohican territory, technically, the Mohawks had at least 2 fishing camps that I knew of on the mouth of the Normanskill and at the mouth of the Mohawk. So in the summertime, there would be Mohawk Indians there.
This is where they both emptied into the Hudson,
yeah.
The Normanskill.
Yeah, because they wanted to access the Hudson for fishing. So summertime, you would find 2 Mohawk villages there, camps more like. And so that was beyond the pines. That was Schenectady. Okay, so the Dutch people picked up the name Schenectady as being beyond the pines, and when Van Curler settled over here, it became Schenectady, beyond the pines, from Albany.
And where does the term Shawnee come from? That's just a variation.
Good question. I've asked Chief Porter about that, and he's unfamiliar with it. But I've read about it on a couple of occasions from, I can't tell you whose writings now off the top of my head. But Shawnee was the Mohawk reference for this area, and I believe it means beautiful valley. Okay, but it really referred to the Schenectady area where the flats were. You know, the native tribes lived there on the flats. I mean, there were Mohawk villages there, and there's usually Mohawk villages on both sides of the river. Okay, so in Scotia, on the other side, across from the Pointic Kill, there's going to be a small village over there, near the Flint House. And on the Pointic Kill, probably under the hazardous waste dump that GE created, was another Indian village. Okay, so you find dual Indian villages at a number of places. In Schenectady County, well, Rosendale, by the Niskayuna train station out on Route 7. And across the river in Fisher's Ferry, which it's on the map, but there hasn't been any excavations done, and probably all of the canal work that was done there has destroyed any evidence that's still there. But it's on the old maps. A place called Ganastadione, which in Mohawk means people from South America. I'm giving you way too much here. Okay, so there's, on the north side of the village there was Ganastiglione, on the south side was Rosendale, which I'm not sure what they called, I think it was probably still called the same name. And of course, through my studies, I've come to determine that the Iroquois came at least from the southwest. They came through Central America. I think they all came from South America.
Well, let me stop you right there and ask you
Okay.
my next question. The origin of the Mohawk tribe, how long have they been here? And the whole creation story is, does a person like you in the 21st century look at that and think of it like as a Bible story, or are there people who really believe it, that it's the truth, the literal truth?
Well, no, it's not the literal truth, but most Native Americans, and in fact Aboriginal people, maybe in other places, I know some places, but I can't name them, basically pick up that same idea of the turtle's back and putting dirt on it and creating the land on which we live. But the Iroquois creation story is one of extraterrestrial origin. And I'm not adverse to it. I keep an open mind. In fact, I don't want to get into this, but yeah, there's a possibility that I think people came from another planet and came here in Noah's Ark type of thing. But I don't know, and I'm an anthropologist.
And talk a little bit about the great peacemaker, Dagana Wida.
Dagana Waida.
Thank you. And the Cohoes Falls story, how that ties in with the Mohawks.
Okay, the peacemaker came to us thousands of years ago. The amount of time is debatable. He came across the Lake Ontario, Ontario, that's where it's a Mohawk word, in a stone boat. So here's a peacemaker coming across the water in a stone boat, sort of reminiscent of the Jesus Christ story. And I don't know if this maybe they had a very early contact with the Jesus Christ story, or if Jesus Christ actually came here. Okay, so it could have been either. So I keep an open mind. So the peacemaker came across Lake Ontario, and he visited all of the Iroquoian tribes along the New York Ridge, the present-day Haudenosaunee, and nobody would listen to his words. And he came all the way down to Ganastiglione, the last village before the falls, and then he made a demonstration to these villagers that, you know, he was going to jump in the water and come back.
At the falls?
Which he did, yeah. He jumped in the river above the falls, and he went over the falls, and he lived through it, and he climbed back up the falls, and he went back to their village, and then they figured he had something to say. Okay, so that's what got them to listening. So then he gave his thesis, or whatever it was. He gave us the great law, he gave us the justice system, he gave us legislature. All of these, the way that the Confederacy governed itself, came from the Ganawaida. At least 1,000 years ago. Okay, I think longer, but at least 1,000 years ago. So the Ganawaida gave us all of these teachings, and among those Mohawk, there was a person by the name of Ianwataha, who was not of a Mohawk nation, but was mourning the loss of his family to diseases, and his whole family died out, and he happened to be down here at Ganastiglione, and so he heard the words, and he picked him up and became a disciple of the Ganawaida. Ianwataha is known as Hiawatha, and everybody knows about Hiawatha being the disciple of the Ganawaida. Now, the Ganawaida disappeared after that. And Hiawatha and his assistant, another disciple who nobody's ever heard of, Jigon Saze, Now, Jigon Sase was a woman. So none of the white European histories pick up on the woman. They never do. Even though in Iroquois, the woman's superior. Okay, so it was Jigon Sase and Ayawataha who then spread the word back among the 5 nations again. And however long it took them, the story goes that just after an eclipse in Seneca territory, the Senecas being the last tribe, holdout tribe, after an eclipse in the Seneca territory, the chief out there, the supreme chief, you're catching me off guard here, hang on a second.
I can't help you.
No, Tedadaho. Okay, so Tedadaho was the chief of the Seneca, and after this eclipse occurred, he agreed to join up with the Confederacy under the Great Law. Okay, now the Great Law itself was one of basically leave everybody alone. Don't pester anybody, don't bother anybody. It had a justice system in that the Jigon Sase was the peace queen. She was the ultimate arbiter, judge. Okay, so if you had a dispute, you would go to her castle, which was near Rochester, and she had her own army.
What time frame are we talking about for?
Well, no, the Jigon Sase became a title. Okay, so it's a title. Hiawatha is still a current chief of the Mohawk tribe.
Okay.
As you know, the name stays. It's a title. So Jigon Sase could have been at least 1,000 years, but I think it was probably closer to 2, but you never know. It depends on when the peacemaker came and how long it takes to convince all of the Iroquois to join together. All right. Now the Iroquois had been fighting one another seriously. In fact, the Mohawks and the Senecas still don't get along. And in fact, there was only 3 tribes. When we go back, when the Iroquois-speaking peoples migrated into the Northeast, it was probably around. It was a slow process, but it probably started somewhere around 4,000 years ago in the Mississippi or the Southwest, and then worked up from there. But another 1,000 years before that, they were probably in South America and had taken 1,000 years to migrate to the Southwest. Guatemalan Indians have the same stories that the Iroquois have, not all, but quite a few of the same stories. The Pueblo or Hopi Indians out in the Southwest are the cousins of the Iroquois speakers that are here. The Pawnee are very close. I don't know if they're direct relatives, but they were very close as far as the migration was. Cahokia seems to have been a major stop for the Iroquois speakers. The Cherokee then broke off and went to the Carolinas about 3,500 years ago, and the majority of the Iroquoian speakers came up the Ohio Valley and encircled the Great Lakes and came up into New York that way and Lower Canada.
And it was initially 3 tribes?
Mohawk, Onondaga, and Seneca. The Cayugas and the Oneidas broke off when these Mohawk and the Seneca got large. The Oneidas broke off as a younger brother, and the Cayugas broke off as a younger brother.
Let me ask you a quick question. These pronunciations that you so easily come up with, were they always easy to you, or did you have to practice it at the pronunciation?
I guess I'm pretty good with language. And maybe it is partly intuitive. You know, there's a lot of things that you know, when I was a kid, I didn't understand, and I began to understand them as an adolescent, teenager. Things like how I tie my shoes is an Indian technique. Oh, okay. Yeah, because instead of just wrapping the thing once, you wrap it twice. Okay, and it's the way I was taught, the way my father was taught, and it was, you know, and it came down through him. There's a lot of things. I'm still finding, you know, relationships. Like my grandmother and my father actually could make lace. They were tatters. And okay, so lace making happened to be a major occupation of the Indians at Onondaga, where my grandmother's grandmother came from. Okay, so here's another connection back to the natives of Onondaga, where the family was for a few generations. Handed down from my grandmother to my father, and from my grandmother's grandmother to her. All right, so many, many years. So I just found out that's where that came from. And the migration patterns of different families, there's reason for everything. And that's, you know, when I was doing genealogy, that's what spurred me into the history aspect, because I started learning all of this history doing people's genealogy. I'm doing somebody's right now who I just realized I'm a cousin back in the Mayflower days. But she's looking for her Indian connection. Now I just found last night that the family, part of her family, went to Canada they were loyalists during the Revolution. And that's where they got involved with the Abenaki. They were up there in the Abenaki. So now I've got someplace to go look for this person's name. You know? So doing genealogy, I discover a lot.
Yeah.
You know, the different peoples and families' migration patterns, and different Indians' migration patterns. So my family were, on the Cornelius side, were, I believe, Mohican, or Mahican. And they were located in the middle 1600s in Bern, up on Thatcher's Park, where they went again after the Revolution. But for 100 years, after the Mohicans sold off all the western properties to the Dutch, they lived out near the Taconics. Okay, so all from the late 1600s until after the Revolution, they lived out in the Taconics. And then after the Revolution, the Mohicans moved west, and the stay-behind families, what they call Melungians, just kind of made their way to different places where they could find, because they got dispossessed where they were. And my family went back up to Thatcher's Park, the Indian Ladder. That's where my family lived, the Indian Ladder.
Let's get to the Mohawks and the Mohegans again.
Mohican.
Mohegan.
No, Mohican, with the C.
Mohican.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. The Battle of 1669, 1668?
Wolf Hollow?
Wolf Hollow. Give us a quick summary of that and what it meant.
Well, after the Dutch got here, the fighting got a little bit changed. Originally, they would have non-lethal warfare, for the most part. And they would have they would plunk you in the head, and they would, you know, steal people, but they wouldn't kill too often. After the Dutch got here, then killing became fashionable, as it were. The Mohican Wars with the Mohawks, the Mohicans had access to guns at that point, more than the Mohawks did, and they took advantage of it, and they tried to wipe out the Mohawks, who were their enemies and had suppressed them for the last 800-900 years. Okay, so now they're getting back at the Mohawks and driving them off of their land. Okay, because the Mohicans had this land at Schenectady before the Mohawks got here. And it failed. That's all I can tell you. Wolf Hollow happened and 1,000 Indians died. A related battle was at the Morning Kill in Charlton. About the same time, white people remember the Indians coming there and leaving memorials along the road. I can pick out the spot pretty much from research that I've done.
What street is that on?
Peaceable Street.
Peaceable Street, okay.
Where it crosses the Morning Kill.
Which is a branch of the Outlaws? Or
No, it
separate?
goes into Ballston, the outflow from Ballston, and then into Cateros.
Okay. So that battle
Was a related battle, another Mohican War battle that very few people know about that one.
But it was those two battles that kept the Mohegans east of the Hudson River pretty much after
Yeah,
that?
that was those two battles that are the only two that I can speak of with any knowledge that had to do, and there were other ones down in the Catskills, but I can't tell you the specifics of those battles down there. Although let me point out, the famous King Hendrik of the Mohawks was actually a Mohican chief, because his father was Mohican and his mother was Mohawk. He was eligible for chieftainship in both.
Mm-hmm.
And he grew up as a Mohican chief. And in Barren Island, the Battle of Barren Island, the Mohicans lost to the Mohawks. Actually, they beat them at another battle, and then the Mohawks set up a trap. And when the Mohicans,
Where is Barren Island?
it's on the Hudson, just south of Albany. And so the Mohawks set up a trap. The old, set up a campsite and go wait in the woods. And the Mohicans came and attacked the empty campsite, and the Mohawks came and thumped them. So at the end of that, as a prize for winning the battle, they took Hendrik as their chief, because they needed a chief. So they took him. I don't think anybody actually died in that battle.
Mm-hmm.
That was before the white man.
And he remained a Mohawk.
Well, no, let me think. That was after the white man,
But early.
yeah.
Yeah.
He remained a Mohawk chief after that, because the Mohawks were on top.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?